Good morning and welcome to the Morning Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ham, and we are, as always, coming to you from the Spotlight Studios in Morristown, New Jersey. This is part of the bigger PodMex event here on Friday, January 15th. So this will be the first of 3 episodes that we post from this event. Our first guest today is looking to help you achieve your highest human potential. He does not subscribe to the scripts society hands us or the boxes people try to fit us in. He's the founder of Creative Studios, a digital marketing agency, founder of Converge, a community for young entrepreneurs, a former semi-professional surfer, and a professional musician. He is Jeffrey Venn. Jeff, welcome.
What is going on, Mike? How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for doing this. This is awesome. Like I said before, I was really interested in like your story and like what you were all about when I heard you in some of the networking groups that we did in the last PodMex event. And then when I got the email saying that you were going to be part of this show, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Like I was pumped for this.
Awesome. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So I want to learn a little bit more about you because I don't really know you at all. So if I take this one sentence that I just read out of your bio out of context, he does not subscribe to the scripts society hands us or the boxes people try to fit us in. That could make you sound like some type of vagrant that lives on like the fringes of society. But I know that's not true because I could see you in the camera and you look put together. So let's just learn a little bit more about you. Take me through like who Jeff Venn is.
Yeah, so sounds a little bit like an anarchist. So yeah, I mean, a lot of things are just handed to us and we never question them. Like I didn't choose my name. I didn't choose where I was born. My physical forms like the genetic lottery. So those are perhaps things we can't control, but a lot of things we can, but we don't question them. So by nature, I'm a pretty flaming creative, right? I love graphic design. I've been a musician since I was 6, since my parents forced me with piano lessons. For fun, I learned Spanish in my early 20s in college and actually really learned it. So I've always been a kind of out there thinker, and I did all the right things. Went to a normal high school here in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. I got a computer science degree at the University of North Florida here in town. And then I went to work for this big municipality here in town. And so I checked all those boxes, but at some point in my early to mid 20s, I found it stifling. And even today, I meet so many people that kind of dread Mondays, right? They get the Sunday scaries, or I've even met people that on Saturdays start worrying about it. So, and we spend so much time at work, right? So I don't know, I kind of broke the mold and started out on my own in my late 20s, which has its pros and cons, but I'd rather suffer the way I'm suffering now and do those benefits than just following what was handed to me and staying at that job, which actually had a pension at the time, if you could believe it. It was one of the last holdouts. Everybody's like, why are you leaving? So that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
Yeah. Like what kind of, I guess, like intestinal fortitude did it take to make that jump from what you were doing into what you started, when you went out on your own?
Let's say there's 2 things here. And if, for your audience, if you're like me at the time, you're in a job that you're just starting to hate and you realize you could hop to the side. So I was in computer science and IT and stuff like that. So there was a lot of opportunity there. And then there's always the thing of going out on your own. So at the time I was in my late 20s and I left on really good terms from this municipality. So I knew I had a fallback plan. At the time I was married with 1 kid who was a year old and I was the breadwinner. So there was definitely some fear there, but I don't know, at some point, regardless of your age, I think like the suffering or the monotony of what you're doing, like tips the scales and you just got to take action. Think about it. Even if you've been in a career 10 or 15 years and you jumped out on your own, like, let's just say you could get through a year with some income and some savings, you could always go back to that industry you're in. If you hopped out of something for a year, I'm sure you'd be employable. So I don't know. I kind of measured the risk and reward. And also at that time, I had a lot of energy. So I kind of didn't care. Once you get a big monthly nut or big overhead, it's a little bit different story, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's very daunting when you see the expenses that you have. But all right. So what was the first thing that you started when you went out on your own? Was it Creative Studios or was it something else?
Yeah. So in 2005, I launched Creative Studios. It's a web design and digital marketing agency. And that was back in 2005. And web was really coming up. So I had a little plan. So the stable IT job was going very well. And I set a goal of moonlighting 15 hours per week. And I kind of set the 6-month goal, and I act like I'm super regimented and disciplined. I'm actually, I'll get really focused on stuff, but like many entrepreneurs, I'll work in fits and phases. But generally, I'd hit those 15 hours a week. And when I thought I could do that successfully and stack up, I believe it was like a 2 months of revenue, like in the forecast of jobs, I was like, all right, I'm gonna put in my 30 days and cut the cord. And sure enough, in March of 2005, I kind of started that journey, and by around October, I pulled the plug, which was kind of scary, right? You want
Yeah.
to work and just scramble and be like that mouse in Cream, which turns so hard he turns into cream and scurries out. So that's how I did it back then. That was the little crux to launch it.
Right. And then like as you kind of progress, I mean, so you have like these other things. You have Converge and you have like it just seems like you got your hands in a lot of different pots, which is something that I love. Like I think that's awesome. And obviously it's going to be interesting to kind of like how you're going to figure out how to balance your time. But take us through some of the other stuff that you kind of took yourself or you started as you
Yeah,
were
for
going through that
sure.
process.
Yeah, so I've been at this, like, it's actually going on year 16 now. So I'm fortunate enough to have the business largely run without my day-to-day involvement, and we can unpack that a little more in a while. I started out just doing everything. So now that freed up more time. And what I found in the business, as much as I love websites or online marketing or paid ads, I'm just kind of sick of them. If I ever had to manage a website project again, I'd kind of puke. I was never good at the CPA money stuff. Like I was good at understanding like money and sales, but actually doing like PA style work. So if I ever have to, be sending out invoices and collecting again, that would be a step backwards for me. So I slowly fired myself from the things I was never good at, or the things that just took a lot of time that I need to get off my plate. And what that did over time was freed me up from having to worry about the day to day. So now I serve as like a founder in a leadership capacity. I still do a bit with the marketing, and that freed me up to kind of speak to the younger Jeff. So my ideal goal is to launch a co-work space here in Jacksonville, Florida for millennial and Gen Z entrepreneurs. But in the meantime, you can go to weconverge.io. And I've run some mentoring programs. I've run some year in review things. I'm just really trying to give back to the younger people that are stepping up and getting out there and doing it. Heck, age doesn't matter. You can step out at 35 or 55, but a lot of young people are programmed by their parents to get that finance job or to do this, that, and other, and they may really not want to do that. And when you're younger, say in your early 20s, you don't have that big overhead, and you have the luxury of kind of doing multiple hustles and maybe pursuing some of your passions and making money off those. So that's kind of where my heart is now. It's kind of never been easier to do a side hustle or to do something that really fuels your tank and make some money off of it.
Right. So you mentioned earlier in that answer that you eventually started kind of giving out responsibilities. So as someone, I don't know if I would necessarily call myself a control freak, but I know that there's one person in this world that I can trust to get something done, and it's me. Right. And so like I know, like when I do this show, like I record it, I schedule it, I edit it, I post it, I do all that kind of stuff. And granted, my budget requires that, but what was it like to try to take something that you had built on your own and start giving out that responsibilities to other people?
Yeah. So, Mike, if you're like me, you've built your business by utter control and attention to detail. And in the beginning, I did every single thing, every single sale, every single proposal. Once we had a bunch of websites live over the first few years, every single support ticket that came up. And slowly I had to give away that control. So it's ironic to build a business, you do it by utter control and attention to detail. And now with the leadership thing, I'm learning to trust and let go. And that's been a long journey, but I did this. So I'm in website design, right? And to find a website coder is pretty easy, always has been, right? So the websites would take about 30 hours to build. So when it was just Jeff with his hat on and he landed 5 websites, all of a sudden he's got 150 hours of work ahead of him. It's not even talking to a customer or doing a sale. So that was an example of the first one that I farmed out. And I'm a big proponent that it's pretty easy to find, someone that, like, you run a title company that could process the title things correctly and follow the standards, but it's very hard to find people with good follow-up. So I would always do a trial project, and I would always really look at the follow-up. If you say you're going to have something done Tuesday, we'll get the thing done. If indeed you need to move it or there's truly emergency, don't let me know Tuesday morning at 9 when other things are depending on it. So
Right.
I really look for those people that had great follow-up, and I would always start with a couple trial projects and kind of loosely couple those relationships. And over time, I just attracted the right kind of people. And it's not a walk in the park. I find a lot of people plateau in our organization, and we'll start growing and they won't want to grow. So over time, not all those people with a great follow-up have stayed around, but by and large, that follow-up is super important, because I find a lot of people can do the work. They're a dime a dozen, but a lot of people can't follow up. Can I give my favorite tip in finding people that have good attention to detail?
Absolutely.
So this is so simple, and it's the most brilliant thing I've done in the hiring process. So we all know what websites are, right? So let's say I'm hiring like a project manager that's going to, help build these websites and communicate with customers. So very important attention to detail projects. So we'll post like a page or two job description, and right in the middle of it, we'll be like, hey, pop quiz time. Give us the answer to the math question 15 plus 2 at the top of your application. And I did the math when we were hiring about a year or two ago, like 65 applicants came in and like 11 answered what 15 plus 2 is. So in my opinion, and tell me, Mike, if you're hiring someone and you clearly asked like right in the middle, like what 15 plus 2 was, said it was a pop quiz, and you can't do that, like I don't even want to see like how poor you may be 3 or 6 months later, like doing the job, right? Because
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's
so
just like a simple thing like that, if you're following just like the steps that you need to do anything, you would see it and just get it done.
yeah, exactly. So little hacks like that. And fortunately, we have a team where you spend a lot of time with the people you work with, right? Like kind of almost a third of your time in your life working. So yeah, it's pretty important to find people that you can really trust and get the job done.
Right. Yeah. So I mentioned to you before we started that, and I've said this a bunch of times in the show, so the people that listen know, well, they know who they are. The majority of my listeners are between the ages of like 25 and 35, 40. So they're, young entrepreneurs and maybe new to real estate or whatever it is. So that's why I was saying to you before we got started that I think you fit perfectly because you're a good, you're a guy that has a lot of insight for what these younger professionals are going through, if they have different thoughts about like whether or not they want to be in the corporate box or do something on their own. So what are some ways that you actually like reach out and do work with these young entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so for right now, on the website weconverge.io, so Converge is what I call it. I've been running some mentoring programs and some year in review programs, and so I'll do something like this. We might want to start a hustle, or these are people that may have a digital marketing agency. One person was like a high-end copywriter, and we'll bring them into like a 3-month program. And for those 90 days, they'll go after one wildly important goal. Because Mike, if you're like me, there's so many ideas we have to work on our business, but we'll get started on them. But they're not urgent. They're just important. So those important things that are not urgent always end up getting pushed back. So I'm a big believer in accountability and in coaching. I always have some form of it going on for myself. And a lot of it is just setting that target and having that good follow-up. There's good people around. So every week you're showing up and, you're holding yourself accountable. You're like, hey, it's month 2 of 3. I'm after this wildly important goal. Like, where am I at in moving the needle? And Mike, I find this, doing something is always better than doing nothing. So like, if we have an idea of some things we should be doing on our business or a way we want to side hustle, we get overwhelmed. We're like, oh man, I want to do this type of consulting. I don't know how to start it. I really don't have time, but there's always a baby step to take. There's always a next step. So I find if we really, put that work cap on, surround ourselves with people that are of a like mindset and go after that thing, it's amazing. We can land in just 90 days working after one wildly important goal.
Yeah. So you talk about like the one wildly important goal. So, like to me, it's interesting to look at, the way that you talk about like fitting in the box, right? You don't, you necessarily want to get out of that box that society's trying to put you in, but also there needs to be a structure. So there has to be like some type of, give and take with that like mindset because you want to get out of the norm, right? But you also need to make sure that you're doing the right type of stuff to make sure that you're progressing towards that goal. It just can't be sometimes like I mentioned to you, like how I operate. Like sometimes I'm just so all over the place that stuff starts to pile up, because like I do like to be outside the box and think creatively and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I need to make sure that I'm like structured to get it actually done. So like, is there like a way to balance that effectively?
Yeah, for sure. So we run into it a lot on our team. So the digital agency I founded is at createwebstudios.com. And we have around 10 people on the team. And you're totally right. A lot of times myself or the team will split out in 10 different directions, right? And so it's almost like we just move it forward a little bit in a lot of areas and it dilutes the effort. So it's a constant battle. Like I want control of my time, and I love the autonomy that comes and the freedom that comes from entrepreneurship and from not having someone tell me when to wake up. Or what services and products to sell or things like that. So obviously I have a big creative brand, but at the same time, like you said, if we don't add structure around that, if we don't stay on one thing for a while, we'll never get anywhere, or we won't progress from where we're at. And I don't know if you're like me, life is very satisfying when we progress, right? Maybe it's as simple as a weight loss goal or an exercise goal or a goal in a relationship. And I find without like measured progression, satisfaction can go really down because, people will be barking at you all day long. So you'll do that work. And if you're not kind of innovating your life and making it better, it just can get kind of mundane for me.
Yeah. So you mentioned goals, and usually I say this I ask this towards the end, but we're going to do this for like the creative agency and stuff like that. So you talk about goals, and I agree. Like, I think getting something done, like something that you've had hanging over your head for a while, is one of the most satisfying things ever. Like, I used to be a baseball coach, and like working with guys like in a bullpen, like, pitchers and stuff, and getting them to, accomplish something that they've been working on for forever. And then you see them do it and they're so pumped up, like they're challenged and they're trying to get it done. And then once they actually get it done, then they're, ecstatic. So what were maybe some early goals when you started the creative agency? What were some early goals that you had that you accomplished that you were like, all right, now we're really going to start to get rolling once I hit that milestone or that goal or whatever it is?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, like any business comes down to like sales and then collecting on that money and making a profit. Now, if it's just you, as long as you're not like paying out a ton of costs for production, like a lot of that profit and income are kind of the same thing. But for sure, we always have, and I've always had like a financial goal. One was just the bottom line when I went out on my own of keeping bread on the table for the wife and the kid at the time. Another one is this, like in websites or one-off projects, right? You get paid to do a website and it's done. It's kind of like building a house. So one goal was recurring revenue. So even in our agency last year, we wanted to get recurring revenue to 85%. We started the year at about 72%. Unfortunately, the pandemic came and has just flattened those numbers so bad, but those are a couple of goals we've gone after. At one point, I had no recurring revenue, right? So it's kind of could be really feast or famine. To some degree, still is because 100% of our nuts not covered by recurring. But that was an important goal I had. One is as a business, as you go beyond like word of mouth and people just knowing you, kind of exhaust that first network. You need to have some form of marketing because as soon as you're against the table with 3 or 4 or 5 competitors and people don't know you that well, if you don't have some form of marketing, some kind of digital presence, some kind of clout in the network you're in, you'll never get the nod. So that's one that, if you're like me, you may have always struggled with is getting that marketing going. So those are a few goals where, we're really proud of our marketing and branding right now. At one point, there was no recurring revenue. Right now, unfortunately, it's about 50% of our business. Pre-pandemic, we're up to 72%. So those are just a couple I've been after. They're pretty substantial.
Right. And then, maybe looking ahead for the year, because obviously we're coming out of 2020, which threw a lot of gut punches at us left and right. 2021, excuse me, has the potential. I mean, it doesn't have to do much to be better than 2020. So like, what are some things that you're hoping that happen? Is it just those goals that you're talking about? Or maybe there's like some new things that your projects you're working on that you hope to expand the business? Like, what are some goals you have for this year?
Yeah, for sure. So 2020 was wild. I'll just give a quick history of what happened to us. So we were flying along in January, February, March 2020. We were about to hire someone, and all of a sudden, this like quarantine, this pandemic hits at the end of March, and it was pretty scary. Like every one-time project we had was put on hold. A bunch of website projects were about to sign, and they didn't sign. We had quite a bit of medical customers on retainer. Well, the orthodontist and the dentist and some of the others just had to shut their doors. So like heck, they're going to pay us for marketing. So it was pretty wild. So I was looking at April, and never have we seen a forecast of if we needed $1 having 50 cents come in based on cancellations and pauses. We weathered the storm pretty well. Our recurring revenue took a big hit. So in 2021, largely we're keeping the goal the same. We're after 85% recurring revenue, started the year at 72. Right now we're at about 50%. So this year, our first goal is to get back to 65%. And also we have a big metric around retention. So until we're at those two numbers, we're probably going to keep that goal the same. And the reason is this: if we have 85% of our revenue recurring, we can kind of cherry pick the other 15%.
Right.
And if we have good retention, that 85% is a pretty solid number that you can rely on month after month. So this year, goals are going to be the same. A little footnote: I'm on a podcast with you right now, Mike. Previous to when we got on the show, we were talking about how podcasting has benefited your business. So our goal is this year to launch a podcast. And then two, with some of the extra bandwidth I have, I'm going to continue reaching out and mentoring those millennials and just giving back, because it just gives a lot of satisfaction and it's something new. I've been doing websites for way too long.
Right.
While they do intrigue me and they're so critical to business today, they don't like inspire me like something totally fresh, like 10 eyeballs looking at me like eager about their business idea.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like, when you started, you went on your own to get out of that box, and then you almost like created your own box that you put yourself in, because then, like you need the machine to run. It's not like it almost like, not that it loses its creative, interests, I guess, but it just becomes like your job. Next thing, like I've always heard like different, perspectives on like passion projects and all that kind of stuff. If you're going to make that your actual job or your career or whatever, and then it's like, well, then it becomes not a passion project, or the passion, you lose it, because then like it becomes a job, and that's how you actually put food on the table for you and your family.
Yeah, Mike, you're totally onto something there. That's the ironic thing. By jumping out of like the corporate box and mold, I built my own. And one of my goals is to have the business run without my day-to-day involvement, and then set up the next generations to grab it. So I'm in my 40s. Our employees are about 24 to 36. So I'm looking at, the people in their 30s to run with it for the next 10 years. So that's kind of my out of this box.
Right.
I was doing really good at that the last few years. The pandemic literally at this moment has kind of pulled me back in a little more than I wanted, but it's not, a 40-hour grind for me to do it. So I don't know. I think that's so ironic though. You get out of one box to get into another. And I could talk about, I've been at this 16 years. There's been some really hard times where I've had a lot of weight and stress on my shoulders and just not a lot of pleasure in the work. But, I always say, Mike, it's called work. It's called a job. It's not called a vacation. It's not called your favorite thing in the world. So I don't know about you. When the hard times come, you just got to grin and bear it.
Yeah, right.
Something's so hard, you just got to change it over time. Like if you hate doing the finances, or, at one point I just didn't have the time to code websites, well, then it's on me to get it off my plate and do that successfully and get that relief.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you say like, when times are tough and all that kind of stuff, or stuff that you don't like I think you find out a lot about yourself, like when your back's against the wall and like the chips are down, like how do you respond, and then it's easy if you're in like a corporate world to kind of fall back on the corporate blanket, but then when you're out on your own, then you're that blanket, so it's just, it's almost like you're on an island by yourself that, you need to, do all those things that otherwise. Yeah, go ahead.
For sure. And that's why like podcasts like this, or like the mentoring I'm doing, or, my self-receiving coaching has been pretty critical. At times I was like, oh, I don't have time to go to that event, or don't have time or money to pay for coaching. But you're totally right. You get on an island and you can kind of, run out of water on there, and it gets kind of scary. So you got a good perspective on it. This is really good for the audience.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I hope so. So let's talk about, I'm curious to know more about like the stuff that makes you tick, right? So a semi-professional surfer, how does one be a semi-professional surfer?
Yeah, so I don't know, it's funny to say this, but I like drill into things and just like master them pretty well. And it almost becomes like an obsession. And I got really good at surfing. I've always lived within walking distance from the beach. And from when I was like 12 years old on to when I went to college at 18 or 19, I pretty much dominated all the surfing competitions here and everything. The difference back then was it was like pre-internet and pre-like social media and all that stuff. So there was just fewer opportunities to go that pro route. It was like a really narrow thing. So kind of had the skills there, had really good results. And really mastered that as one of the things that I did back in the day.
What does it entail to be like a semi-professional surfer? Are there like events? I know nothing about surfing.
Yeah.
I'll go to like, I remember once we were down in Delaware for a buddy's bachelor weekend or whatever, and there was like a whole surfing competition, and we were like watching from the beach, and it was cool, like watching them do all the stuff. But that was like the extent of my knowledge of surfing.
Oh yeah, so there's surfing competitions. It's your typical tier thing, like take soccer, baseball, or anything. You got like your local region, then you got your state region, then maybe the Southeast region and the national level, and then with surfing, it really does go international. And so that was kind of the tier there. The thing I'm most proud about, though, that's not related to work is learning fluent Spanish. If you want to unpack that for a second.
Yeah, we were gonna get there, so let's do Spanish.
Yeah, because surfing is just one of those things I did. Oh, and music's another one too.
Yeah, we were gonna get to music too. Like I want to ask about all like the cool stuff.
Great.
Not that the other stuff's not cool. I just want to make sure we cover all the bases.
Well, so it's totally right. So if you're listening to this show and you're like me and you got this like business focus, and for me the digital agency, like that does bring some joy and some value, but at some point it can be very much of a grind or very much of a responsibility to bear. So I think as entrepreneurs, as self-starters, we always got to look at our wheel, right? Like friends, spirituality, and hobbies. And so with Spanish, I'm at UNF, University of North Florida, getting my computer science degree. I end up playing music. I was really in a church for some period of time at a bilingual church. So I landed this bilingual church right in Jacksonville, Florida. I meet all these first generation Hispanics. I just love it. I hear them chatting in Spanish, talking in Spanish. It's pretty easy to sing in another language. If you notice, like an Australian sings or a British person sings, like I think Adele's British, you can't hear their accent, right? So I started doing a little bit of that. And for fun, I just took 4 classes at the university level. I didn't change my major or anything, but I immersed myself in that culture in Jacksonville. So from when I was like 19 or 20, all the way to like 24 or 5, like my best friends were, Hispanic, and they had a whole different way of hanging in culture. And granted, they were first generation, so it wasn't like I was like living in Latin America or anything, but at the same time, I learned Spanish, and I dated Spanish girls, and I had this really cool girlfriend from Costa Rica for a while, and her parents and her pretty much only spoke Spanish. And so literally right here in Jacksonville, Florida, I found a way to immerse myself, be part of a community, and pursue music. And sure enough, after about 2 years, I learned to speak it fluently. And the cool thing is, once you learn something well, like say you learn to play piano really well, even if you don't use it all the time, decades later, you can bang out some piano or bang out some guitar chords. So to this day, like can definitely plop me anywhere in Latin America and I can find my way around.
Yeah. You know what I think is just so interesting about that is the fact that like, I think the way that rounds you out as a person. So like, I mean, obviously like surfers have a stereotype of being just kind of like relaxed and laid back and all that kind of stuff. But then you have these other ways that you're just able to kind of like dive into something. And then just like I said to you before we started, like, I like to think that my MO is like, once I get on the tracks, you better get off the tracks because the train's coming through. Like I'm not stopping for anybody else, and then you take these other projects that like allow you to express yourself creatively, or, whether it's, in a different culture or in music or, on the waves or whatever, so it's just like interesting to kind of see like how you're able to use that to try to approach business, because I think that there is like a connection there.
Yeah, so Mike, you and I were talking about this, and I'd be interested to have you share for a second. You have the most stylish setup if people are watching on video, the green screen, you got the little character in the background, you're like outfit and stuff, but yet you run or part of a title company, right? So like you felt the same thing, like just through doing the podcasting, right? It's business, but it's business with a twist, and it's like amazing connection and stories like we're having right here now.
Yeah, like so I tell this story all the time. So, and I mentioned to you before, like when the show started, it was a 5-minute LinkedIn video series where I would just interview somebody just like we're talking, but I would do it out. I didn't have the green screen. The Spotlight Studios. I wasn't here yet. I would do it out on my kitchen table. I would wear like a suit jacket with a tie and everything, and I would interview somebody, and I had all the questions written down, and then they would get the questions beforehand, so they knew how to prepare, because I wanted it to be very buttoned up, very professional, make sure that it looked good and sounded okay and all that. And they were successful. Like, I'm not saying that they weren't, but there was just like something missing from it, and like, especially throughout 2020, like there was like a lot of opportunities where you weren't able to have human interaction or express yourself in like a different kind of creative way. And I just like, at one point, like I said, I did 60 episodes over a 12-week span. And like the most fun episodes I had were the ones where I would put together like blooper reels from the episodes that we would record. And I was like, that's me. Like, that's how I operate when I'm out selling title insurance. Like that, when I'm at a lunch with somebody, like that's how I am, like I'm, sometimes cursing, sometimes, laughing and, not like stumbling over my words. And I know that I talk with my hands a lot. And I know that I don't have like the Bob Costas, Jim Nance voice, but I just am able to kind of connect with people on a different way. And that's when I was like, screw it. Like, let's just lean into this and like make this something that's both me and an opportunity for other people to get on this platform that I have and talk to my audience. So I think you're absolutely right. Like, I think being able to kind of combine those things just makes you more of like a well-rounded person, and you're able to like do both better if you're, if you're emphasizing making sure that you're putting the time and effort and energy into both of those things.
For sure. Yeah, and that's true. And the coaching I'm in right now, it's with a business psychologist. He's all about going after that wheel. And you can pick the wheel, but it's like, family, friends, spirituality, like your physical fitness and stuff like that. So yeah, I find that the more energy we apply on a passion project, or maybe like after work, I'm not like thinking about work or websites or something like that. I'm really into like big civilization and history and the universe and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
that stuff kind of floats my boat to where when I do come into work, it hasn't been always on my mind. Because at some point, and this should speak to some people in your audience, if you just go after one thing too hard, you'll probably get that success. But at some point, the burnout's going to hit you really bad.
Oh yeah.
And you got to turn around and look at the rest of your life, like your hobbies or perhaps your health or, close relationships. There's going to be a lot of damage there, and or like a lot not going on. And that's what I learned from this business coaching. I'll just tell a quick story.
Yeah.
Peter Shallard, if people want to visit commitaction.com, it's a great affordable accountability and coaching. But Peter Shallard, he brands himself as a strength for entrepreneurs. So he's worked with some pretty high flying people. He's spoken at Nike's like R&D lab and stuff like that. But, he knew these guys in their late 40s, and they founded a very successful business to where one year they made $1 million in profit. And then they were like, why can't we make $1 million a month in profit? And they did it. And one of the founders was his like one-to-one like psychology coaching client. This founder like would wake up, play Angry Birds, and order pizza just because he just burned himself out so bad. But when you hear the numbers, like who of us wouldn't even want like $300,000 of profit, not salary, but profit in a year. So his point was, be careful the ladder you cross, because these guys hit what most people would just be blown away with. Yet he was so just like, obviously it was functional in business, but so kind of burnt out in his head that, his go-to addiction was literally Angry Birds and ordering a pizza. And that's where his headspace was. So that story really stuck with me. So, it's helped me keep focused on the wheel of life. Lastly, I'd say this though, I don't really like working more than 40 hours a week on one thing, like on the website stuff. So I kind of built the business with that in mind. So I certainly had a few busy weeks, like, you can put boundaries around stuff. Like I could work 24/7 right now, but that'd be so unsatisfying. So I do like to have some boundaries in place.
Yeah. So how do you set those boundaries? Because like one of the things, so I'm in sales, right? And like sometimes I have clients call me at 11 o'clock at night, and I take those calls because in my head, I'm like, if I don't answer this phone call, they're going to call somebody else with this deal that maybe it's like the game changer, like the difference maker that's going to put me over the top, on my commissions for the year. So how do you like balance that with saying like, how do you say no? Because I think that's ultimately how do you set boundaries?
Yeah. So first of all, it's unlikely that something out of those hours or bounds is literally that important, but that's just a belief, a thing. We got to like grab everything when it's not true. Like something else will come, and yeah, by chance that could have been the most important deal ever. But I'll say this is communication patterns, right? And this, anybody doing a hustle should know this. At first, let's just say you're doing social media consulting. You're so eager to get your first couple of clients, like you'll put out a contract to do 5 things, but you will do 10. They will send an email, you'll respond immediately. They will whine a little bit, and you're so afraid of losing one of the 5, you'll freak out. And people will just abuse that, not because they're bad people, but you've told them it's all right to ask for 10 posts or to change the 5 posts that were already thought out for social media. So what I do is this, like, I don't respond first thing. If someone's super whiny or gnarly, I'll wait to collect a handful of emails from them, or I'll be like, hey, I see a lot of stuff coming through. We can solve these things. Let's get on a call, and I'll give them some windows of time. So, looking at when you respond to emails, how quickly you respond to emails. And also when you see someone start to really fire up and kind of attack on all levels, if you respond to that energy, they will stay at that. Yet for what we do, like websites aren't the end of the world. So someone doesn't need to send me, 7 emails in one day and blow me up at 7 p.m. and talk to me the next morning at 9 a.m. on these website projects. It really doesn't need to run like that. So I find that when I send emails out, the response time, and there's some cool tools where you can like schedule a response. So, sometimes I'll see a bunch of stuff coming at 5:32 and I'll set the response to literally go out at 8:42 in the morning. And then lastly, send people to voicemail. Or if you really do need to touch them, say you're in real estate or something like that, where it is kind of 24/7, just say, hey, I got your request. Sounds good. I'll hit you back by 10 tomorrow. And that person's, aside, or put aside. I'll say this: when you sit at a restaurant or go to a bar and they're really busy, if someone just makes eye contact with you, or the server just swings by with like a mountain of trays and like, "Hey, so glad you're here. Be with you in just a second," like that buys a lot of time. So a lot of times, if you do have to respond after hours, just make a commitment. Say, you know what? I'll get on that first thing in the morning. Expect to answer by 11, and people are stoked and they're done, and it's off your plate. And it literally took 2 seconds.
Yeah. So this might be a deep question. I don't know if it is or not. So you talk a lot about like the wheel of life, right? And like the spokes in the wheel of life. And then you mentioned before that you're really interested in the universe and how that operates and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just like curious because I'm just, as someone that maybe not is as interested in that. So I'm just like curious to know, what is it about that interests you? And then kind of like how you approach it now that you've been able to kind of, like you said in the bio that you put out here, like escape the rat race, kind of build, pave your own path.
Yeah, such a great question. So I grew up in an extremely religious household, and that was fine, right? But it taught me to look at the world in really black and white, and things were sanctified and not this, that, and the other. And really, it came down to mind control at the end of the day. And so when I shed some of those beliefs that I didn't choose, it was like the belief of my birth, right? I really started looking at things and looking at why. And I'll just give you an example. We have this tradition called Thanksgiving, of course, right? And then on Friday, sometime, this like disgusting gluttonous thing, in my opinion, called Black Friday came to be, right?
Right.
So businesses could get in the black. So, people are like, "Oh, well, why do you hate on the holidays or this, that, and the other?" I'm like, well, when did Black Friday start, right? We have this day of gratitude, this day of Thanksgiving, followed by this day of just gluttonous consumption to cancel it out. So even that is something to question. Most people on my team work like around 35 hours a week and not 40. So where did the 8-hour work week come? Why is it Monday through Friday? Well, the answer was 8 times 3 is 24 hours. And, Henry Ford back in the day, could have worked employees in 12-hour shifts. So they broke it up into 3 8-hour shifts, and we never questioned it. So a lot of these things, like what I was growing up with, is this is good and this is bad, and this music is this and this music is okay. It was taught and learned and assimilated. It may not be right. For example, for me, I just don't celebrate Black Friday. I realize I may be missing some deals, but there's deals all the time. I don't need to.
Yeah, there's deals all the time. Yeah.
I don't need that stupid $180 TV, right? There's cheap TVs always.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to use this phrase because I like using this phrase because I've had a couple of these moments myself, and it's interesting because it kind of like ties into the religion side. So did you ever have like, did you have like a specific coming to Jesus moment, pardon the pun, where you were like, oh, like it's not all black and white. Like there's a lot of gray in a lot of these things.
Yeah, for sure. So in 2012, I was really sick. I spent like 18 days in the hospital, had this really bad infection. It was hard to detect. I got better over antibiotics, but we all want to have hope in this grand afterlife where all our suffering's gone, all our tears are gone, everything's made right and lasts that way forever and ever. And so I don't know, I literally felt my body, going to death during those 18 days. I knew at some point I was going to get better, but I had like the fever and was going sepsis. So that really made me wake up and question the beliefs that I had been handed. And when I started to do that, I realized they fell apart like a thread. And I realized that if I grew up in China or grew up in the Middle East, most likely I would have some form of their belief system. So I realized this thing that I held as so sacred and so infallible was in fact very fallible. And then lastly, if I look out with what we all have, our 5 senses, and if I look at how diverse the world is, there's deserts, there's mountains, there's wet zones, there's not. And if I look at things we do agree on, like all around the world, 2 + 2 does equal 4. If I have, a stone in a hand, for example, no one would argue that there's now 2 stones in my hand. So I realized the world's a very diverse place, and it didn't come necessarily with this mysterious manual. And to my knowledge, no one has really come back from the other side. Like no one gets out of Earth alive. So once I put all that into place and got a better perspective, I kind of got a sense of peace about it and was able to shed some of that stuff. Whereas before I just bought it hook, line, and sinker. So kind of feeling death a little bit. And then 2, looking at the diversity of the world. Once again, going big picture, kind of opened my eyes. I won't say it was an easy transition. And I definitely offended a lot of like close people in the process. But at the same time, like I'm, content where things are at now. And I just didn't take this thing that I just grew up into, that was just stuffed down my throat.
Right. Yeah. All right. So we have probably like less than 4 minutes left before we have to wrap this episode up. So I want to make sure that I ask one more question and then do our closing segment and then close it out. So the final question, and again, this is kind of all over the place, but this is just how my show normally goes. We talked about goals earlier. So I'm interested just to see like what kind of goals you have for the young entrepreneur community, maybe throughout this year. Like there's some milestones you're trying to hit with that.
For sure. So, the pandemic has caused me to spend a little more time on my business. But when we realized that, during the pandemic, we weren't going to buy real estate or launch a co-work space or get into a lease, I just literally said, how can I reach people? And so I started a 90-day mentoring program that followed into an annual review program. So my intent is to run some more of the mentoring programs. And what I learned was this: I had about 6 people in the first one. So it was like a close-knit group. We met weekly. But the goal this year is to launch some more of those 90-day mentoring programs, but also to add value. A lot of people, times when you're just really starting out, you don't know about the power of the signed contract. You're actually sticking with scope, or you're really afraid to collect money because you're so happy to get 3 clients. So we want to take that 90-day mentoring and have like lessons scheduled through it that really help people get the tools that just don't come intuitively. You know what I mean? Like the one I just mentioned about money. I don't know about you, but if you've done any kind of side hustle or sold any kind of piece of art or some creative work, you're just so happy to get a little money for it. You won't ask for it until later, or people ask for a lot more than you promised. So that's just one example. So I want to instill a lot of those lessons that have helped our company become a lot more stable to these people just starting out, so they don't have to learn the hard way.
Awesome. All right. So under the spotlight, this is our closing segment. We're going to do this kind of quick. So they've listened to Mike Hamm and Jeff Venn talk for about 40 minutes on a lot of different topics: entrepreneurship, starting, getting out of the box, the universe, the wheel of life. So what is one thing you want the listeners of this episode to walk away with?
Yeah, so I believe that inside, like, we've all been given certain like gifts and talents and capacities. So obviously I was a flaming creative with like the music and the, speaking Spanish, the entrepreneurship. And some people might be geared more towards a CPA and a check the box kind of job. But if we can like really be honest and true with ourselves and true with those around us that love us, perhaps if we're in a family scenario or have real close people in our life, and kind of like start unpacking those things. And it doesn't mean starting a business. It could be meaning expressing art, because like art was always pushed to the side because you can't make money off of it. No, just going painting. So I think inside each of us, we have these like longings and callings. And if we'll just take a little baby step or take action on those, we'll have so much more satisfaction in life. So my parting thoughts would be like, take some time to get alone, take some time to assess your life, to assess your work, your hobbies, or things that are on your bucket list. And perhaps you can't go travel Europe now, but you could take an amazing vacation at one of our national parks here in the United States. So I think inside of us, we really do have those answers. And a lot of times we just don't take the time to listen to ourselves, or it's just filled with so much busyness that, we kind of miss the boat and miss out on a lot of satisfaction and a lot of joy.
Awesome. I love that. All right. So for everybody listening, I'm going to make sure that I put all of Jeff's contact information, the links that he mentioned throughout the show, in the show notes, to make sure that if you want to learn more about him, learn more about his businesses, his community of young entrepreneurs, you reach out to him, because obviously I'm sure he would love to hear from you. I will put my own contact information in the show notes as well if you want to hear us talk about a specific topic or be a guest on the show, themorningspotlight.com or themorningspotlight@gmail.com. Jeff, thanks for coming on with us today. This was awesome.
Yeah, I loved it, Mike. Thank you.
Absolutely. And everybody else, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.